Okay, it's about 7:05, so let's get going. I'll start with a little housekeeping. Like I said, if you could mute your mic and put questions in the chat, that'd be appreciated. The meeting is being recorded, even though it doesn't say that. We're recording it somewhere else. We have the free platform of Google Meet, which doesn't allow us to record or live stream. So I think it's being recorded somewhere else, and hopefully will be put on YouTube. This is the first time we've tried this, so um, you know, fingers crossed, right? This is our first time trying a virtual tour of Hangman Creek, and I'm really excited. I wanted to highlight some of the cool stuff going on in the basin, and have you get to know this relatively, I think, sort of unused creek that has a lot to offer, both with learning and recreation and restoration and everything, right? Um, so that's sort of what I'm going to try to do, and then we'll have a couple people talk about the restoration projects. So here we go. Oh, and then with no tech issues. Yeah, so I'm Jewel with the Spokane Riverkeeper. That's me, the bald guy on the right, if you can't see me. We're a small team of 5, really, and our mission's to protect, preserve, and restore the river for future generations. We're a nonprofit, right? So we survive on grants and donations. And we're about 5 people. You can see Katie and Ann and Liv and Caitlin, who some of them are on the call right now. We work in advocacy, river cleanup, science, river flow protection, anything that's going to help the river thrive, really. But those are our big pushes lately in our programs. It does include also a small restoration program. And by restoration, I'm talking about on the ground, planting trees, and hopefully moving dirt, and some science around effectiveness monitoring. And I'll share more ways you can get involved with the Riverkeeper in a follow-up email. I won't put your email on our list or anything. It's just going to be this one follow-up email. But if you'd like to sign up, we'll give you that opportunity to sign up for our email list. So the first thing everybody asks is, is it the same thing as, is Hangman Creek the same thing as Latah Creek? And yes, it is. It is officially, yes. The Washington state government and local governments use Latah Creek, which means a place to fish in Nez Perce language. But locals in the federal government use the name Hangman Creek, and that's really to memorialize the hanging of Chief Qualshin and 6 other Indians along the creek. Up on this monument that you see here is up there on Kentuck Trail Road, and this atrocity really was, obviously weighs heavily in the name, but weighs heavily on the land as well. You can go. This is a public area. You can go and see this on Kentuck Trails. We use the term Hangman Creek because actually local tribal governments have asked us to do that. And so we're doing it to honor their request, but also to recognize what happened there. We don't want to forget that. But both are officially correct, and that makes it a little confusing when sort of searching on what to do on Hangman Creek, right? I want to start out with just some facts here. It's a pretty big watershed, right? It's about 40,000 acres. That's, I guess, 673 square miles of 430,000 acres. There we go. And it's about 60-ish miles long. It flows from Idaho. So its headwaters are really in Idaho up there by DeSmet, or, if you drive Highway 95 south past the casino, that's the Hangman watershed. It's pretty low elevation, about 4,000 feet, right? So it doesn't get a ton of snow, although it does get some, more than here. And, of note, it provides excellent farmland for dryland crops, right? And so we're not irrigating crops out there. It's the amazing soil, which I'll talk about in a minute, that provides that great habitat. And it should be noted that it historically supported salmon, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You'll see this map again, I think, in another presentation. One big thing about the creek is its geology, and I think this really shapes a lot of what I'm about to talk about, and other presenters are talking about. Here in Spokane, you guys have driven by the Qualshin Golf Course and seen those Qualshin Bluffs, I guess I called them. That's the really sandy soil that was deposited, 10, 15,000 years ago by the Missoula floods. Really relatively recent. Um, and it's eroding. You can see this picture. I just canoed Hangman Creek recently and took this photo, and it's still eroding to this day, um, pretty rapidly. And then down or upstream of there, but it's to the south because Hangman Creek flows from south to north. And I should note that it ends up here in Spokane, right? People's Park is the mouth of Hangman Creek, right there near Sandifer Bridge. So we also have this really cool canyon section, which is 200-foot basalt cliffs. It's about 11 miles long, and it's just unbelievable. It's relatively untouched environment, and not only is it gorgeous, it's a really exciting rafting or whitewater kayaking when the water is up. And there's an entire presentation that can be done on the recreation in Hangman Creek, and I think whitewater rafting would be a good one. Caitlin and I did it last year. It's pretty fun. And then south of there is the Palouse, right? It's this amazing farmland, but it's also highly erodible soil. It's relatively young, right? The Palouse was sort of blown in there by winds when the glaciers receded, and it's really steep because it is young. And that highly erodible, very fine soil gets into our creek and is suspended for a long time. And that's what causes a lot of the pollution you'll see. And a lot of this land use is a big contributor to pollution. Hangman Creek it's one of the most polluted creeks in Washington state, if not the most polluted. And it's polluted with sediment, temperature, dissolved oxygen. These are the kind of things like non-point source pollutants that, they're not going to harm you as much. They're not toxics, but they do make it really hard for fish to live there. It's to meet our designated uses, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's just dirty, I think, is the way to think about it, right? And it's hard for salmon and trout to live in it. What caused this, along with the geology, that really fine sediment, as well as this, it's what we've done to the creek. It's the straightening of the creek, which you can see in the upper left corner here, the removal of vegetation along the creek, which you can see there's no riparian vegetation or streamside vegetation here. And we'll talk about that more later in another presentation. This has caused like deeply incised channels, like you can see on the right. There's some riparian vegetation there, but there's no connection to the floodplain. And so when that creek gets high, it's still just moving really fast. And that causes more erosion. And it's like positive feedback loop where more erosion causes more erosion, and it causes it to run faster, and more erosion happens. This also causes, right, hot and muddy water that's also full of nutrients, right? So we don't have anything filtering the water and allowing it to sort of seep into the floodplain. We get this pollution you can see moving downstream, as well as a lack of habitat for birds and fish and beaver and elk and those kinds of things, right? So it's just really a highly altered environment is what we're saying. And we can see that in water quality, but really you can see it driving through the watershed. A lot of this is pretty obvious in the Palouse area, but down here in Qualshan, I don't have a great picture of it, but the roads that cut off these meanders, like right across from Hatch Road, there used to be a big S bend of the river, or Marshall Creek, near Marshall Creek. The pollution impacts everyone, right? And we call it designated uses. These are the things that legally sort of you are required to protect by the Clean Water Act. And this could be a whole nother talk by Caitlin about what these are and how we protect them. But really what you need to know is trout and salmon need clear and clean water and cold water. And Hangman Creek does not have that, right? And so it violates that designated use for fish rearing, spawning, and migration. Sediment buries their food in their nests, right? And could you imagine fishing on this plume? This is a mouth of Hangman Creek looking downstream there, sort of near People's Park. And you can't fish this really for trout if there are any trout in it. I don't think there are. So it impacts recreation, and these pollutants, could potentially harm humans, especially if they're bacteria in the water. Um, and aesthetics, it's ugly, I guess, is sort of how we view it. I don't know. No one's told me they like the pretty muddy water of Hangman Creek. But it also impacts other things. All these nutrients can go downstream and impact Long Lake or Lake Spokane, and cause harmful algae blooms or low dissolved oxygen that causes fish kills, right? And so you sort of get this pollution in Hangman Creek, but also affects the Spokane River and downstream in Lake Spokane. We'll talk. I think there's a couple slides about this in other people's slideshow here, but salmon were once in Hangman Creek, and I was doing quite a bit of reading on this to prepare, and reading some quotes from tribal elders. The book I was reading sort of said Hangman Creek was muddy back in the 1890s or 1880s, probably didn't support salmon, but then they interviewed tribal elders, and every one of them mentioned how important salmon were. There were 8 or 9 fishing camps along Hangman Creek, including in the town of Tico, and fish did seem to be an important part of the culture, or were an important part of the culture, and food sources of the Coeur d'Alene tribe along the creek. There currently is a reintroduction program by the Coeur d'Alene and Spokane tribes, but the Coeur d'Alene tribe is leading the one in Hangman Creek. And they're releasing big adult fish in the creek and the Spokane River. One of the locations is the Pilcher property right there at the South Hill Bluff, and in the headwaters as well. And then they're releasing juveniles as well at 9 Mile Dam, hoping that one day they will return to Grand Coulee or Chief Joseph Dam, where there's no fish passage, right? So they'll out migrate through the dams, get spilled over the dams, and then one day return in 4 to 7 years. And then they will truck them back here to spawn. This is relatively recent, and so we are assured that this is working, but we haven't been told a ton of data about how well this is working yet. But it's really early, and so salmon, could be returning very soon. And if you're lucky in the summer, you'll see them in the Spokane River releasing fish there at Hangman Creek. We saw them at Water Street put in, sort of near Red Band Park downstream. So what can we do about this, right? Hangman Creek's a muddy mess. We don't like it. We're just a little organization. What we did was we asked for enforcement of state water quality laws. And so we didn't sue the Department of Ecology, but we ended up at the Spokane Riverkeeper in 2018 going into a settlement with the Department of Ecology, asking them to enforce water quality law in the Hangman Creek Basin. This designated the basin, the Hangman Creek Basin, as a high priority watershed. And really what that has done is directed a lot of grant funding to restoration work in the basin, along with, this isn't entirely us doing it, but it's certainly affected the flow of money. And now more money than ever before is coming into Hangman Creek. And so what does that lead to? Well, really it leads to restoration, right? Because you got to do the work on the ground and get it done. And there's restoration is really moving beyond just tree plantings. And that's what I want to highlight tonight. And that's what our speakers are going to highlight. Floodplain restoration, big, like shoring banks that are eroding, and some cool programs, other programs. This is the Lands Council's Beaver Dam analog work. They're not speaking tonight, but I thought I'd highlight it because it's just a really low cost, or relatively low cost way of sort of restoring a floodplain. And hopefully we'll get them on soon to talk about their work in the basin. The Coeur d'Alene tribe couldn't be here either, but they have a really, really neat project in the headwaters it's translated as Make It Crooked Again, right? So they've taken a incised channel, filled it in, and let the floodplain restore itself. And they've done a lot of work along the way. And then on the left is Dan's project. He'll talk about that here in a little bit. So tonight we're going to highlight 2 sort of speakers. I wish I could get everybody to talk, but we only have so much time. We have Dan Ross of the Spokane Conservation District and Jim Tuck with Trout Unlimited. Let me pull up Dan's bio. He is going to talk next, but he is a longtime employee of the Spokane Conservation District. 26 years, I believe, or no, since 2000. Yeah, it's 26 years. And he has 26 years of field experience working with SCD. He is getting a lot, really what you need to know. He's getting a lot of work done on the ground, and I think you'll probably get that from his presentation. But it's not just limited to Hangman Creek, and it's not just limited to restoration, fish barrier correction projects, so culverts and things like that, and also work in the Little Spokane River. So I think Dan is up next. I have his presentation queued up, which is right here. But I don't know if Dan, if you wanted to show your movie first, or when that was.
Yeah, Jewel, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just do an introduction real quick. I mean, you did one for me, but just, Jewel, you've been touching on a lot of the impacts to Hangman, and then I get the pleasure of actually trying to correct some of those impacts. And, 100 years of impacts to a system is going to take a long time to correct. But, we have seen some really good work put on the ground, both by the Spokane Conservation District and in partnership with a lot of those other entities out there, like in the Northwest Land Conservancy, Lands Council, Riverkeeper, Trout Unlimited. So it's not just it takes a village. So I really want to make that point up front here. So yeah, with that, go ahead and roll that 5-minute video that was produced this last season.
Great. All right. So I think I got the audio working. If not, let me know.
Hangman Creek and its tributary, Little Hangman Creek, flow from Idaho's mountains to the Spokane River, supporting people, farms, and fish. Over the years, runoff, erosion, and the loss of streamside plants have raised water temperatures and harmed fish, while erosion has carved away valuable farmland. Today, partners see a future where healthy water and farmland go hand in hand. Landowners are working with Spokane Conservation District to voluntarily restore the creeks while keeping local farms thriving.
The history of Hangman Creek is such that it's been manipulated since the early 1900s. There's been a lot of manipulation of the channel, and when you do that to a stream, you're basically interrupting a geomorphic process that is allowing a stream to manage its own energy. When you straighten out a channel, it can't manage its own energy any longer. So it carries those velocities downstream, and those get exacerbated and start tearing banks apart. And we've seen that all up and down the system.
As long as I can remember, this creek has been an issue of breaking out of its channel and making new channels running and just making a mess of things.
In 2023, the Spokane Conservation District partnered with the Washington State Department of Ecology to launch the Hangman Creek Riparian Restoration and Conservation Program, providing financial incentives and hands-on support to help farmers voluntarily complete projects that improve water quality and protect creek banks. Partnering with generational grower John Heaton, they reshaped the once straightened Little Hangman Creek into natural bends to slow water and reduce erosion. They also planted hundreds of trees to stabilize the banks.
It was interesting though, this year, it was a pretty big flood year, and it was flooding in Tico. It was flooding out in Lovell Valley. It was a mess. And right through here, the water crested, or kind of like at its peak, you could see the row of ponderosa pines on either side of the water. It was almost like it was planned. It's like, yeah, it really did its job. So we were kind of impressed.
Successes like this show how collaboration can help farmers navigate tough situations and regulations with limited resources. That's where the Conservation District comes in, serving as a bridge to connect farmers to the tools, funding, and expertise they need to solve complex problems.
I really view myself as an advocate for farmers, And a lot of times they're straddled with regulatory authorities that come out and tell them they have to farm a different way or a certain way, and they don't have the resources or the knowledge or the ability to do that. And that's where I see the Conservation District coming in as a partner with farmers to give them the technical assistance and the resources to do the restoration work, and then also beat the bushes and find financial incentives that don't undercut their bottom line.
We're changing the creek banks here, which I think is important. You know, we've had conservation programs for years way off to the sides, but not right on the main stem. And so I'm very excited about that. My neighbors at first were very not real on with it a little bit. They're worried about regulations and stuff, but I have all the way on both sides of me now guys have signed out. It's a very attractive program. And I think right times are coming.
Trying to get these things done with limited resources, but we have the budget to do it. We have a plan. It's that old adage, how do you eat an elephant? And that's really what we're doing here is taking off bites where we can. And you go walk around out here and you see that buffer width and the grass is coming out competing the weed species. And you realize that you're well on your way to a success story.
I think it's so important to see what farmers, what they are. And we all are stewards of the land. You know, we're just trying to make a living out there. And taking care of the land and getting it paid for, what you do own, is important for the next generation. So that legacy will continue multi-generational. And I'm so fortunate we have 6.
Local farmers and the Spokane Conservation District are working every day to build a more resilient future for the Hangman watershed, one rooted in partnership, innovation, and stewardship. To learn more about the Spokane Conservation District or to find out how you can get involved, visit SpokaneCD.org.
Thank you, Jewel.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. Okay, we'll get to your presentation here. Let me open it up. Yeah. Oh. Thinking maybe too many people on here. There we go. All right, Dan, just tell me when to switch slides here.
Yeah, I'll just say next.
Okay.
So Jewel already gave a bunch of really good background information on Hangman Creek. So I'll probably skip through a few of these first slides, just breeze over them. I do have a lot of slides, and there are actually a lot of projects to highlight, and I don't want to skip over those too fast. But so yeah, this is the background information that Jewel already kind of shared. There are land use impacts, and primarily the work I've been involved in is stabilizing the vertical eroding banks. We do have an egg production department at the Spokane Conservation District, and they offer programs that promote conservation tillage and other things and practices that agricultural production that benefit and improve water quality. So I'm not going to dig too deep into that right now. I'm mainly just going to be talking about the projects that we've been involved in. Next. So one of the major functions of bank erosion in Hangman Creek is not is what I've observed over 26 years is not necessarily the large 100-year flood events. It's the moderate flood events where there's ice rafting associated. So next. So when that occurs, you've got some ice rafting at a moderate flow event. What that's doing is it's scouring and undercutting these banks, and then they start to collapse on themselves, and then of course rinse, repeat. You can go to the next slide.
Oh well.
And so this is an area. This is in the River Mile 17 reach, which we started working in 2017 with some, well, actually 2016 with some design work. And then in February of 2017, we had a 10,000 CFS runoff event. There was a lot of ice associated with that one. And I immediately, right after that event, called the design engineer because we had pre-survey or pre-project survey work in place. And we were able to quantify approximately 16,000 tons of stream bank material came from just this site alone in that one event. Next. And so everybody's probably seen this picture, and Joel, you probably had this one in your slide. I mean, you had one from a different angle.
I was trying to mix it up, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. But yeah, this is what happens, and so this is a combination of agricultural inputs and bank erosion. Next. And so that a lot of that material ends up down behind 9 Mile Dam. And so this is a picture of that, just that deposition and where all that's ending up. Next. And so when you have an undercut or actively eroding stream bank, you can't just go plant trees into it because it's not stable. They're just going to disappear on you, and they just don't have any opportunity to get established. So you have to have that stabilization component before you do the restoration. And so I'll be talking about the methods that we've been using for stabilization in Hangman Creek as we go along here. Next. Just to give you an idea on the process and the timeline that it takes to implement a project. Of course, projects are scaled differently, site specific, but generally it can take up to 2.5 years from planning to implementation. And then of course, after you do the dirt work, you've got a couple more years of repeatedly addressing and planting and getting plants established and doing weed control and things like that. So, you know, to get to a stable condition, it can be about a 3 to 5 year process. Next. So this is that same site that you saw a picture of the erosion and the 10,000 CFS flood event. This is Hangman Creek River Mile 17 Phase 1, which we started the work in 2018, and it went through 2019. This was a vertical eroding bank that was, the treatment method here was to re-slope the bank and do rock toe protection. That re-sloping of that bank gave us basically a planting medium. And you can see here, there's a prison crew out there actually planting trees on that newly re-sloped bank. And then of course, we also treated that bank with coconut erosion fabric. Next. This is another closer example of that process. So the rock toe protection, the coir erosion fabric, that's keyed in. The erosion fabric is keyed in down at the bottom of the slope and at the top of the slope, and then gets a grid of wedge stakes inserted onto that fabric. Next. This is an example of a woody revetment bank in that same reach, the River Mile 17, where we're putting in wood on a sharp meander bin where there was a vertical bank. Next. This is a view from the other end of that woody revetment bank. Once the wood was in place, we set coconut erosion fabric and then went ahead and did the restoration planting. Next. So back to that same picture of that flood event at that location. This is the same location. That's before, and next. That's after. So this is the construction in River Mile 17 Phase 1 was completed in July of 2019. This particular bank was treated with a log jam revetment. A lot of wood at the toe just to prevent that undercutting action. This was a combination of 2 landowners for Phase 1. Next. And then a couple of years later, some neighbors that were just downstream of River Mile 17 Phase 1, well, immediately after we did River Mile 17 Phase 1, they contacted us and said they were interested in doing something as well. So we started the the process in 2019, and then the planning process, the design and planning, and then began construction in 2022. Next. And so this particular site was two different landowners. There's three stream bank sections and with various treatment methods. And right here, you're looking at basically a large woody debris toe with kind of a composite of rock and woody debris with vegetation planted in during the construction process. And then, of course, when we were all done, we went in and planted more native trees and shrubs. Next. This is an example of that wedge stake gridding method I was talking about earlier on a reslope bank with a rock toe and coconut erosion fabric. Pounding those stakes is really labor intensive and takes a lot of effort. So
Dan, you probably got like about 5 more minutes.
All right, we're going to cruise fast because I want to get to the last projects we did at the end of the season. Go ahead and cruise on through here. That's a fabric encapsulated soil lift. That's a different method too. So this is.
Wow, I'll go back to that.
Before and after. Yeah, just keep cruising through these if you want, but they are a really stark contrast.
Neat.
Of course, River Mile 17 has had Okay, go ahead and step back just a couple slides there, Jewel.
That one.
Yeah, sure. So this one included 4 landowners. There were 2 phases over 5 years, over 1 mile of bank treatment. And then, of course, the restoration and maintenance is ongoing. Again, this was total combined funding just for the construction was about $788,000, but we poured more money into that since then with additional plantings and maintenance. So go ahead and go. So Little Hangman Creek was done in 2023. This was in that 5-minute video that was shown earlier. John Heaton was a landowner, farmer out in the area that agreed to participate in this project. The design approach to this one was to create a 100-foot wide corridor or flood corridor with a 35-foot wide floodplain bench and a low flow channel. Next.
Wow.
You can, so that blue line is the 100-foot wide width, and the yellow line there is the 35-foot floodplain bench. So we are reestablishing floodplain at this site. This site we moved, go ahead next. We moved about 30,400 cubic yards of material for this project site. So that's equivalent to about 3,000 standard dump truck loads. So a lot of dirt moving on this one. It included channel reestablishment and meanders. Cruise on through, Jewel. That was just depicting how we did the bank construction. This is just post-construction. So this has had a couple years to reestablish vegetation. This backup one. This site is a site in near Latah that was just completed last year. It has an avulsion path there marked in the pink, but the red lines are the bank treatment sections. Go ahead. So that's just the treatment method primarily used at this site. So this is the other one that we completed. I don't know how that slide got off. Go ahead and go back one, Jewel. So this is forward one. There we go. So this is another project that was completed just last year, Hangman Creek near Duncan, which is just downstream of the Rock Creek confluence. Go ahead and go forward. I don't know how that slide got there, but go ahead and go forward again. So this is just starting the project construction. So that red line up at the very end, upstream end of there is how we access this bank section to start the construction. Cruise on through. This is placing of the woody debris and starting the work. That's me down there in the water. This is just post-construction. The treatment method was a composite wood rock toe protection with fabric encapsulated soil lifts, and then we revegetated with natives. And this one will have ongoing maintenance and replanting and planting to get everything established. Of course, we also plant a lot of willowits and bare root stock during construction, and every one of those coconut fiber soil lifts on the top of this bank are between those lifts has a number of plants placed in between them too. Go ahead and go forward. And then of course we did the restoration. So that's the last one right there. Next one. Yeah, if there's any questions about this or anybody wants to see this presentation or wants a copy of it, please feel free to contact me.
Yeah, that's an incredible amount of work, Dan. Thank you so much. We can take questions at the end about, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. So if you want to hang around a little later, hopefully Dan can stick around and answer questions. If not, you know where to find him, right? At the Conservation District. So, great. Thank you, Dan. So next is Jim Tuck. He's going to share his own presentation, but if it can't work, I'll share it for him. So Jim is a longtime friend of the Riverkeeper and educator from St. George's School who recently took a job with Trout Unlimited National, who's doing a really cool project on Hangman Creek that is more floodplain restoration. And so he'll get into the specifics of it. Yeah. Go take it away, Jim. You got it.
Okay. Hey, Dan, that was incredible. With that last picture, there was a bumblebee in the photo. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was. That is an incredible, just a GoPro super by chance photo that I had a GoPro going and it snapped a shot of a bumblebee. And
that was pretty.
I couldn't
pretty
do that again if I tried.
Yeah. Well, folks, good evening. I'm Jim Tuck, Restoration Project Manager for Spokane. I'm going to try to navigate through, let's see here. Now, Jewel and I messed with this earlier today, so we'll see if I can pull this off. Bear with me.
All right. Nice, Jim. Take it away.
All right. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Well, I'm going to kind of blow through this because it's going to be somewhat redundant, but this is Grouse Creek Ranch. It is upstream of the Duncan project, the last one that Dan shared with you all, that big cut bank stabilization project. So yeah, we're upstream from there, not very far, upstream from the Rock Creek confluence. And this project is underway, so I don't have any compelling completed pictures to show you. It's just all in design right now. So aerial photo, as you can see, kind of the project overview. We sit down in a valley below the Palouse farmlands. As I said, south of the confluence of Rock Creek. We are north of the Hangman Creek Canyon area, the area that Jewel talked about that's just remarkable and beautiful. There is a small perennial creek that flows down from the west off the farmlands into the northern end of the project area. It's called Courtney Creek. So I'll give you just kind of a background. Back in 2012, that's when Spokane Falls Trout Unlimited First met the landowner, and since that time has developed a long-standing relationship. In particular, I'll call him out, Harvey Morrison. He's been basically the kingpin for this Grouse Creek Ranch project to get to where it is today. Then just 4 years ago, Harvey and others approached the landowner about the feasibility of a large floodplain project on the property. And from there, a letter of understanding was developed, a request for proposal for project engineering services. We hired the engineering services from Interfluve. And then in 2024, Interfluve did their initial field research survey, which then informed what's called a reach assessment report, which was a very comprehensive report that ultimately is informing what we're doing today as far as the restoration strategies. And then just this last fall, we completed 3 additional surveys, including a wetland delineation survey, topographical survey, and a cultural survey. And we're working towards a 60% design as we speak right now. Okay, let's see if we can make this thing move. There we go. Oops, it's a little touchy here, folks. This is the north end of the property. You can see some of the infrastructure, the buildings there. The project is 2.2 miles of creek length. This is the middle section. And as you can see, there's a pond here. The landowner wants that pond left in place in case of fire issues. They had to use it, I believe, in 2017. Some choppers came in and dipped buckets in there and actually saved a lot of the property infrastructure because of that pond right there. And this is the southern end, and this is where we're going to be doing the first phase of the restoration work at Grouse Creek Ranch. And we're going to show you this little drone icon here. There's brief footage I'm going to show you that goes from the north end of the property towards the south end. And we'll see if I can make this baby go. You kind of get an idea where the project area is going to be. It's going to include all of this part of Hangman Creek. This floodplain right here where the cursor is, we're going to reconnect that, punch in some side channels, do essentially kind of what Dan was talking about with all the great work they're doing. I'll show you some pictures of the design as it is now. Oops, we already saw that. Okay, the big goal is we want this thing shovel ready by 2028. It's very confusing with the phases. We call this phase 3 because it's the third phase of the 3 that are picked apart in this 2.2 miles. But I call it phase 1. So sorry for all the mix up here. But anyway, shovel ready by 2028. And then additional design completed for phases 1 and 2, hopefully by the end of 2028 as well. And then full on construction from 28 and hopefully completed by 2029. It's a pretty big goal to have that all taken care of within 3 years. We'll see, but that's the plan. Other goals are the reconnection of the floodplain, as I mentioned, creating side channels, all in efforts to slow those big velocities, those big flow events down, create more in-stream habitat, and ultimately down the road a long ways, creating habitat for returning salmon and trout. Okay, this is the design. I don't think I'm going to go into it a whole lot. It's really kind of techy, but it's pretty cool. I'm going to point these things out. These little islands we're going to create after we carve out. Okay, the main stem of the creek is right here. It's just basically flowing from the southern end to the northern end of the property. And like Dan's projects, we're creating these side channels to create these meanders. And from the material that's excavated here, we're going to create these islands so that when the main stem of the creek is flowing, it's going to ping off of those and create its own little meanders in here. And on the backside, there's going to be some plants, riparian plantings put in there as well. And also the whole goal here is to raise the bankful elevation of the creek so that it spills into the floodplain, reconnects the floodplain, and then accesses these side channels. So it's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing some things from this in the near future. Come on, advance here. Oh, goodness. Can't get that. Oh, boop, boop, boop. There we go. Okay, so the basis for design. How am I doing on time, Jewel?
Great. Yeah, you have about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm flying because I want to make sure people have time for questions. So this basis for design came after the reach assessment report, and this informed all the strategies that we're going to employ at that southern end. So folks, this is right now, this top picture right here is a hydrological image of the current conditions. So when we have flows, I want to say sort of the middle level flows, say like 800 to 1,000. I don't know if that's middle, but somewhere in the middle, not high, not low, but kind of right in between. The creek just flows straight as an arrow, as you can see. It does somewhat access these side channels here, these relic channels, but the floodplain is not connected whatsoever. Whereas under those same conditions, with the strategies that we're talking about, which is cutting in these side channels here, and then adding those little islands that I referred to, it's going to raise that bankful elevation to access these side channels and push that water out onto the floodplain. So large wood installations are going to happen, low-tech woody installations, things of that nature, to all work towards a more complex habitat as well. And then some more from that basis of design. So again, the top is the existing conditions. This is all hydrological 2D imaging that put this together. And then following after we do those strategies and add all of those features, you can see here, if you can look in, the meanders, those little islands are going to create in that modeling, and how the side channels are reconnected here and further downstream and here. It'll all end up being, and this is all done with LiDAR from 2023. So all of it should work to diminish, or I shouldn't say, reduce, mitigate some flood hazard risks that's going on in the creek currently, as well as deposit sediment as that sediment is bombing downstream off the Palouse. Still haven't. Okay. I'll just blow through this, but this picture I want to point out real quick was last February in that southern reach. It was amazing to see, but it covered almost entirely the floodplain that is in that southern reach and reconnected those side channels. So that was from last year. What I want to do is point out is that this project is going to require a lot of permitting and with state and federal agencies, and is consistent with the local watershed plans that are in place today. The project relevance, it's already been hit upon. Hangman Creek used to be a salmon-bearing stream, and the Spokane tribe of Indians and the Coeur d'Alene tribe of Indians relied upon the salmon in those and other not just anadromous trout and whitefish that were in the creek. This project will lead to improved habitat for returning fish. It supports the reintroduction efforts of the tribes. And Hangman Creek is a key tributary. If you think about it, it's only one of two tribs in the Spokane River and one of only 2 points of entry for salmon into Idaho. So it's real critical that we continue to work on restoring this creek. Project relevance continued. Flood mitigation, this was from last year. and Whitman County reported an estimated about $1 million was necessary for needed road repairs. I hate to bore you with this next picture. You've seen this 3 times now, but I've got it also. The idea here is Grouse Creek Ranch is going to work towards improved sediment impacts to downstream communities and water quality metrics. And it's a large floodplain restoration project, one of the larger ones that's been put together, and it's going to hopefully be a demonstration for future projects in the watershed. And come on, babe. There we go. Our team, that's Harvey Morrison right in the middle. This is Jesse Perry, the maintenance person out at the property, grounds crew supervisor. Anyway, TU staff, Spokane Falls Trout Unlimited, the Spokane Riverkeeper, landowner, of course, in Interfluve, is our engineering consultants. And then our partners include the Spokane Salmon Restoration Collaborative, Inland Land Conservancy, and the tribes. The scope of the project is pretty enormous, and it all hinged on that reach assessment report, which included that 2D hydraulic modeling, which forecasted the restoration opportunities that we have identified in our planning to put into place. Along with it, as I already mentioned, we have partnerships and agencies that we're coordinating with. And one I need to call out right now because they've been really supportive and helpful, and they've funded most of the work, is the Washington Department of Ecology. This picture here, again, was a drone still picture taken of that southern end of the property. And you can see again how that water had spread out and is accessing the side channels here and the floodplain. Some milestones real quick. Back in March of 2025, we got the reach assessment report finalized. I presented that report at the Spokane River Forum. We had a 30% design walkthrough that was completed in fall of 2025. The goal is to get up to 100% design by this summer, and then start working on the permitting process. As Dan pointed out, projects like these take a very long time. We're probably looking at least 2 more years before any construction is actually happening. And then funding thus far, most of it's come from the Department of Ecology. We've had some in-kind match dollars as well from the Spokane Falls Trout Unlimited. And I'm working towards securing more funding. Money makes this thing happen, and it's not easy to come up with funds. This is kind of a fun little video here. I want to make a shout out to Cutboard Studios. They helped with this. And it's just an overlap of the creek flow levels from July through that big event last February. You can see from July of 2023 to February of 2025. And here's the big one here. So that was pretty cool. I kind of want to just finish on that. And there we go. That I'm all complete. Thanks, folks. It's an exciting project.
Thank you so much, Jim. Yeah, if you could stop sharing your screen, then we can sort of answer a couple. I did see that there was one person that asked if there's a map pinpointing each restoration project. The answer, I think, is really no. I mean, no one, there's a couple reasons for that. One is because a lot of these projects sometimes are private on private land, and they don't really like to talk about them. There's actually more work that's going on than this, but people don't necessarily give approval to speak in public about it, and that can be a touchy subject. But Dan, I don't know if you're still here and if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, we actually do have some maps, but it seems like need to update them almost annually because of the number of projects that we've been working on. So the current map that we have is probably outdated by 1 year. It doesn't include the projects, but I'll be working on that. And if somebody wants to get a map or that type of resource, just reach out to me. We'll get that into your hands.
Great, thank you. This is a great question, Jim. I think we discussed this actually. In regards to the Grouse Creek Ranch project, what's the design for raft and water passage with the wooden structure and strainers?
Yeah, great question. It's been asked a couple of times, and let me just say, Interfluve, the engineering consultants we're working with, that question because many of the employees that work for Interfluve are actually whitewater enthusiasts. So as they design and consider those features, clearly that's going to be something that they, continue to keep as something that they consider through those design, strategies that they're going to put into the project area. Clearly, the purpose isn't to create strainers or something that's going to, cause problems for enthusiasts that like to raft. I will say this, that particular stretch of Hangman Creek isn't frequented that often, but nonetheless, great question. I can't say I have a dialed in response for you, but it is something that Interfluve does consider when they're putting the designs together.
Nancy asked if there's beavers on the creek. Dan, I know you could speak to this, but this is from my understanding. This is sort of if you build it, they will come. There are beavers on the creek, and they cause all sorts of problems with restoration project. I know the Coeur d'Alene tribe actually had to feed beavers because they were cutting down so many of their willows, and so they planted some willows and then just left the others for the beavers to eat. Dan, have you had any experience with beavers on the creek?
Yeah, there are a lot of beavers in that system, and they in recent years they've been hitting our restoration plantings a lot. But one thing we've noted is once a beaver actually chews off a restoration plant, like a willow, primarily are the ones that respond positively to the beaver interaction. And we've seen, especially on the Little Hangman site, where they've chewed it off close to the ground level, and it resprouts with multiple stems and has more vigor. So, I mean, I feel like there's a really good relationship there between beavers and willows. I've seen river otter. There's a lot of wildlife that benefits from these projects, and ultimately, that's the whole goal here: is to create habitat or restore habitat that benefits that wildlife. Beaver being one of them.
Great question. I think that's it for questions in the chat, unless I missed one at the beginning. No, I didn't. Great. Well, I think in summary here, what I took away from this was really how much work is being done on Hangman Creek, how big the projects really are, and how much time, money, and land it takes to get these things done. And we're lucky to have partners like Trout Unlimited, the Conservation District, and others doing them in the watershed. So thank you for coming. I'll send a follow-up email, and hopefully with the recording that you can share with your friends. We hope to have more like this that focus on other subjects, or maybe just does a deeper dive into another restoration project. Thanks so much for coming to this inaugural Hangman Creek virtual tour.
Thanks, Joel.
Yeah, thanks to Dan and Jim especially. See y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.